What inspires the man who's inspired millions? When you hear the name Paul Simon, you hear more than a musician. You hear poetry in melody. You hear rhythm that dances across continents. You hear truth, wrapped in sound. From the introspective silence of the sound of silence to the vibrant energy of Graceland, Paul Simon has spent over 6 decades crafting songs that didn't just top charts, they changed lives. But behind every great artist is a chorus of influence. So the question is, who shaped him? Which bands stirred something in Paul Simon's soul? Which sounds pushed him forward when the path ahead wasn't clear? Today, we explore the 6 bands Paul Simon loved most, and how their music didn't just influence his sound, it helped define it. Let's start with the most obvious, the Beatles. Yes, everyone loved them. But Paul didn't just admire the Beatles, he studied them. He once said they rewrote the rules of what pop music could be. They didn't follow trends, they invented them. When he first heard Rubber Soul, something shifted. It was storytelling. It was experimentation. It was pop music with purpose. He later described it as a moment of creative awakening. It didn't threaten him, it challenged him. For Paul, the Beatles weren't rivals. They were fuel. Then came the roots of harmony, the Everly Brothers. Before Simon and Garfunkel were icons, they were kids harmonizing along with Don and Phil Everly. Those tight, tender vocal blends became the blueprint for everything Paul and Art would become. They didn't just mimic the sound, they internalized it. And those harmonies, they weren't just influence, they were foundation. Paul once recalled hours spent singing Everly Brothers tunes with Art in stairwells and bedrooms. It was early practice for a lifetime of perfecting the craft of harmony. Now fast forward to the 1980s, and a seismic shift. Ladysmith Black Mambazo. At a time when his commercial momentum was slowing, Paul took a risk. He traveled to South Africa. He listened. He learned. And in the process, he discovered the group that would become the heart of Graceland. Ladysmith Black Mambazo didn't just sing, they resonated. Their rich spiritual harmonies wove a new dimension into Paul's songwriting. What began as admiration became collaboration. And what came out of it wasn't just an album, it was a cultural bridge. Then there's the poet prophet of rock, Bob Dylan. No list of influence is complete without him. But Paul's relationship with Dylan was more complex than most. He respected him deeply, though he sometimes poked fun. He once joked his least favorite Dylan song was all of them. But make no mistake, he admired Dylan's lyrical daring. Dylan proved that poetry could be messy, challenging, even uncomfortable, and still belong in a song. Paul's writing became sharper, more daring. And even though their styles were vastly different, Dylan's presence in the musical landscape gave Paul permission to go deeper. One of the more surprising names, Los Lobos. Known for their powerful fusion of Mexican folk, rock, and soul, Los Lobos had a raw authenticity Paul couldn't ignore. As he continued to explore global influences in the late 80s and 90s, their fearless blending of styles resonated. He praised their musicianship, their storytelling, their deep cultural roots. They reminded him that music doesn't have borders. It has rhythm and honesty. And finally, the architects of harmony, the Beach Boys. Paul Simon once called Brian Wilson a melodic genius, and when he heard Pet Sounds, he knew he was listening to more than a pop album. It was a masterpiece of emotion, production, and vulnerability. The layering, the orchestration, the ache in the arrangements. Paul saw in the Beach Boys a mirror, proof that even within catchy melodies, there was room for sadness, for introspection, for humanity. As Paul once said, great music gives you permission to be human. And the Beach Boys did just that. Paul Simon never chased trends. He chased meaning. He listened not just with his ears, but with his heart. He took from gospel and jazz, doo-wop and African rhythms, folk traditions and Latin grooves. He didn't imitate, he absorbed, transformed. And in doing so, gave the world something that was uniquely, unmistakably Paul Simon. These 6 bands didn't just inspire songs, they helped shape a soul. And through every line Paul wrote, every melody he gave us, their voices echo still